The paradox of opening up. There is a moment in every human life when the walls we build around ourselves feel simultaneously protective and suffocating. Trauma, betrayal, rejection, these forces carve deep trenches in our psyche, shaping how we move through the world. And yet, despite these scars, there is an almost unbearable longing to connect, to let someone in, to risk the vulnerability that once cost us so much. It is here, at this precarious edge, that the paradox emerges. Opening up again feels like walking a tightrope over an abyss. One misstep could expose us to harm, exploitation, or heartbreak, and yet remaining isolated slowly corrodes the soul, eroding not just our relationships but our sense of self. History is littered with examples of this tension. Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic emperor, wrote extensively about the discipline required to govern oneself, to guard the mind against both external deceit and internal weakness. Yet even he acknowledged the quiet, gnawing need for human connection, the struggle to maintain authenticity without compromising authority. Across centuries, this duality has persisted. In medieval courts, nobles practiced extreme restraint, their gestures measured, their emotions tightly controlled. Yet the letters they wrote in secret reveal a yearning for intimacy, a silent rebellion against the rigidity imposed by society. In the modern age, the paradox is no less profound. Social media amplifies our awareness of connection while simultaneously encouraging a performative hardness. The very platforms designed to bring us together often teach us that vulnerability is weakness, that openness can be weaponized, and that trust is a liability. Yet despite every cautionary tale, humans continue to test the boundaries of intimacy, to probe the risk of emotional exposure. There is an innate drive, hardwired and ancient, that compels us to reach beyond our defenses, even when our past screams to retreat. We are left then in a state of suspended tension, forced to confront the question, how can one open up again without surrendering control? The answer is neither simple nor universal, but it begins with understanding the invisible walls we have built. These walls are not merely defensive, they are maps of past experiences, of pain survived and lessons learned. They are both shields and cages, offering protection while limiting the very freedom we seek. By the end of this exploration, the audience is invited to look inward, to consider their own emotional barricades, the defenses they deploy in relationships, in workplaces, in social circles. This is not an abstract exercise. It is an intimate reflection on the cost of self-preservation and the courage required to risk trust again. In this tension, we find the opening frame of our journey, a journey into the mechanics of trust, the architecture of power, and the delicate art of reclaiming human connection without losing oneself. The anatomy of emotional walls. Every human being carries invisible fortresses within them, walls erected over years, sometimes decades, designed to keep pain at bay. These walls are not merely metaphors, they are living structures of the mind, reinforced by fear, shame, and the echoes of past betrayals. Each act of rejection, each experience of being exploited adds another brick. Over time, the self becomes a labyrinth of corridors and locked doors, some of which even the owner struggles to navigate. Psychology offers insight into why these defenses exist. Neuroscience tells us that the amygdala, the brain's fear center, lights up at the prospect of emotional exposure, triggering a cascade of protective instincts. When someone hurts us, consciously or unconsciously, our brain catalogues the danger, forming patterns that dictate how we approach future interactions. This is survival encoded in neural circuitry. Attachment theory explains it further. Those who experienced inconsistency, abandonment, or betrayal early in life often develop hypervigilance, a constant scanning of social environments for threats, an instinct to retreat before being hurt again. Yet walls are never purely functional. They are deeply entangled with identity. Culture and society reinforce them. From childhood, we are conditioned to conceal discomfort and display strength. Boys are told not to cry. Girls often learn to temper emotional displays, lest they be judged unstable. Corporate culture, social hierarchies, and media all amplify the message. Vulnerability is weakness. Openness invites exploitation. Over time, these lessons become internalized, transforming into invisible bars that are as constraining as they are protective. History, too, provides vivid illustrations of these walls. Consider the Stoic philosophers of antiquity, who extolled discipline and self-control while cautioning against the dangers of emotional indulgence. Or think of political leaders who cloaked their doubts and fears in ritualized stoicism, projecting unassailable authority while privately navigating a landscape of doubt and suspicion. Even in artistic circles, figures like Emily Dickinson or Kafka wrote prolifically yet withdrew from the world, balancing profound emotional depth with intense self-containment. These examples reveal a critical truth. Walls are both defensive and expressive, a paradoxical testimony to human complexity. And yet the walls we construct are not impenetrable. Every fortress has cracks, moments of connection, gestures of trust. Glimpses of empathy reveal openings we may have forgotten existed. The challenge lies in discerning which openings are safe and which may expose us to harm. This is where the concept of strategic vulnerability emerges, a deliberate choice to lower defenses in controlled ways, to reveal aspects of the self without relinquishing agency. It is not naivety, it is mastery of emotional intelligence. By the end of this section, the audience is invited to examine their own defenses, to identify the walls built not from whim but from necessity, shaped by experience, reinforced by culture and hardened by fear. The question lingers: if these walls are simultaneously shields and prisons, how can one navigate them without losing power or losing the capacity to connect? This tension, as suspenseful as it is intimate, sets the stage for our next exploration: the historical and societal patterns that have defined human trust, betrayal, and the delicate art of opening up again. History of trust, power, and betrayal. Trust and betrayal are as old as civilization itself, woven into the fabric of human history with the same inevitability as conflict and conquest. Long before social media and modern psychology, our ancestors understood that openness could be both a gift and a vulnerability, a force that could bind communities or destroy them entirely. From tribal councils to empires, the ability to discern whom to trust and when was often the difference between survival and ruin. Consider Machiavelli, writing in the courts of Renaissance Italy. His observations were cold, calculated, yet piercingly accurate. Human beings are prone to self-interest, and reliance on goodwill alone is naive. Leaders who expose themselves emotionally, who assumed loyalty without verification, often fell prey to intrigue and betrayal. betrayal. History is littered with rulers who trusted too easily, a king assassinated by a friend, a general betrayed by a lieutenant, and those who became tyrannical, walling themselves off from all but the most calculated connections. These extremes highlight the tension between openness and self-preservation, a tension that continues to echo in every intimate and professional interaction today. Across cultures and epochs, the paradox repeats. In feudal Japan, samurai were bound by codes of honor, yet even these rituals could not eliminate suspicion. Spies and double agents thrived in these systems, exploiting human trust for personal gain or political advantage. Similarly, in Renaissance Europe, correspondence between nobles and intellectuals reveals a constant balancing act, sharing knowledge and emotion while safeguarding one's reputation and security. Openness, when mismanaged, became a liability. Guardedness, when overextended, bred isolation and stagnation. Even beyond politics, history offers a psychological blueprint. Artists, thinkers, and writers often lived in the shadow of their own vulnerabilities. Emily Dickinson's seclusion, Kafka's fraught relationships, and Van Gogh's unguarded letters illustrate how brilliance and openness were intertwined with risk. They reveal the human cost of trust and the heavy price of exposing oneself emotionally. Yet they also show the transformative power that comes when connection, however rare, is achieved. The modern observer may view these events as distant, irrelevant, or purely historical, but the patterns are identical in contemporary life. Boards of directors, social networks, even intimate relationships operate on the same principles of trust, betrayal, and cautious engagement. The lesson is clear. Vulnerability without discernment invites harm, yet isolation deprives the soul of fulfillment. Humans are, and always have been, navigating the same delicate balance between surrender and control. By the end of this section, the audience is left with a historical lens through which to view their own emotional architecture. We have seen how society, culture, and circumstance have consistently taught us to measure openness with extreme caution. Trust is a calculated risk. Power is entwined with control, and betrayal is not an anomaly. It is part of the human condition. This awareness sets the stage for our next journey, understanding the psychological mechanics that govern our ability to reopen, to trust again, and to reclaim agency without being consumed. The psychology behind reopening oneself after betrayal or trauma is not a simple act. It is a complex, often invisible negotiation between fear and desire, between self-preservation and the human longing for connection. Psychologists describe this as an intricate dance of the mind and body, one that balances risk and reward with every choice we make. The process is neither linear nor predictable, yet it follows patterns as ancient and reliable as the wiring of the human brain itself. Neuroscience reveals the roots of this tension. When someone has been hurt, the amygdala, the brain's emotional sentinel, reacts strongly to potential threats. Each attempt at openness triggers a cascade of chemical responses. Cortisol spikes, heart rate increases, vigilance sharpens. Over time, repeated betrayal can create a hyperactive warning system, one that interprets even benign gestures of trust as potential danger. Yet within this biological caution lies an equally powerful counterforce, the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for reasoning, reflection, and strategic decision-making. It allows us to override fear, to approach connection consciously rather than reactively, and to weigh the potential benefits of trust against the costs of exposure. Attachment theory adds another layer of insight. Early life experiences, particularly those involving inconsistency, abandonment, or overprotection shape how we relate to others as adults. Some become avoidant, retreating emotionally to protect themselves. Others become anxious, craving connection, yet fearing rejection. Reopening, then, is not merely about courage. It is about retraining patterns of attachment, learning to recognize which instincts are protective, which are overreactions, and which are echoes of past trauma rather than present reality. Strategic vulnerability is the concept that emerges from this understanding. It is not naive openness, nor is it the reckless discarding of boundaries. It is the conscious choice to reveal parts of oneself selectively, to test the waters of trust without surrendering agency. It requires acute awareness, observing reactions, setting limits, and listening closely to both intuition and reason. The individuals who master this are not weaker for having experienced hurt. They are stronger because they navigate the world with clarity, resilience, and intention. Real-world examples abound. Consider someone returning to intimate relationships after years of isolation. Each interaction is a negotiation. What to share, what to protect, what signals are trustworthy. Or the professional who re-enters collaborative spaces after betrayal by colleagues. Transparency is balanced with discretion. Empathy is delivered with measured boundaries. In both cases, the stakes are high, the rewards profound. The act of reopening is transformative, not simply for relationships, but for the individual's sense of self. It affirms agency, reinforces autonomy, and allows one to experience connection without being consumed by it. By the end of this section, the audience begins to see that the act of reopening is both psychological and philosophical. It is a conscious mastery over fear, a reclamation of choice, and an embrace of life's inherent uncertainty. The mechanics of the mind, its defensive structures, its wiring for threat, and its capacity for reason serve not as prisons, but as tools. The stage is now set to explore the modern context. How opening up, in a world saturated with manipulation, media scrutiny, and societal expectation, can be both perilous and profoundly liberating. Modern-day implications. In the contemporary world, the paradox of opening up has taken on unprecedented complexity. We live in an era where connection is instantaneous, yet trust is increasingly fragile. Social media, surveillance technologies, and hyper-visible public lives create environments where vulnerability is both amplified and exploited. Every emotional disclosure, every intimate gesture can ripple far beyond its intended audience, exposing the self to scrutiny, judgment, and manipulation. The stakes of openness have never been higher, and yet the need to connect remains as urgent and human as it has always been. Consider the landscape of social networks, where personal stories are shared, celebrated, or weaponized. Oversharing can lead to exploitation, betrayal, or public shaming, while guardedness can isolate, deprive, and numb. Even in professional spheres, transparency can be misread as weakness, while carefully measured vulnerability can foster trust and collaboration. The modern individual must navigate these contradictory currents with precision. Too open, and one risks harm; too closed, and one loses the richness of human experience. The psychological principles explored in earlier sections become immediately relevant in this context. Strategic vulnerability, selective openness, and careful boundary setting are no longer abstract concepts. They are practical survival tools. The challenge is heightened by the constant presence of manipulation, whether subtle or overt. Marketing campaigns, political messaging, and cultural narratives are all designed to exploit emotional tendencies. Understanding these forces is not paranoia, it is self-preservation. Recognizing the psychological levers others attempt to pull allows one to choose connection without surrender. Historical patterns re-emerge here as well. Just as leaders, artists, and thinkers once had to negotiate the tension between exposure and protection, modern individuals must navigate public and private spheres where trust is conditional and attention is a currency. Influencers, public intellectuals, and whistleblowers alike confront the same dilemma: how to open up, to inspire empathy, to build connection without being consumed by the machinery of exposure and exploitation. These examples illuminate the stakes of modern life, showing that the paradox is not a relic of the past. It is alive, pervasive, and deeply personal. Yet despite the risks, the rewards of intelligent openness are profound. Genuine connection, creative collaboration, emotional intimacy, and societal influence all stem from the courage to expose oneself, calibrated by wisdom and discernment. Those who master this balance do not merely survive, they thrive. They experience the world fully, engage authentically, and reclaim a sense of agency in a landscape designed to manipulate emotional responses. By the end of this section, the audience begins to recognize a critical truth. Openness is not a luxury, nor is it a gamble reserved for the fearless. It is a skill, a philosophy, and a practice that can be honed, tested, and applied. In a society where every interaction carries both potential and peril, the capacity to connect without losing power is not just desirable, it is essential. With this understanding, the path is clear to explore the principles and strategies that allow one to open up consciously, reclaiming both trust and autonomy in a world that constantly challenges both. Strategies to reconnect without losing power. Reconnecting with the world after retreating into emotional self-preservation is not an act of recklessness. It is a disciplined, deliberate practice. It requires not only courage but clarity, a keen awareness of both internal boundaries and external dynamics. Strategic openness is not about throwing caution to the wind. It is about mastering the art of revealing oneself in ways that preserve dignity, agency, and autonomy. It is vulnerability, consciously calibrated, wielded as a form of strength rather than a source of weakness. The first principle is boundary setting. To open up without losing power, one must understand where the self ends and the other begins. Boundaries are not walls to keep others out. They are signposts, guiding interaction, clarifying intention, and ensuring that trust is earned rather than given indiscriminately. Consider the professional returning to a collaborative environment after betrayal. Transparency about goals and limitations establishes a framework within which genuine connection can occur without sacrificing authority or self-respect. In personal relationships, clear boundaries communicate respect for one's own emotional needs while signaling openness to meaningful connection. Boundaries, in this sense, are the scaffolding that supports strategic vulnerability. Equally important is the recognition and management of manipulation. In both historical and modern contexts, individuals who trust too freely often fall prey to exploitation. Strategic openness requires an acute ability to read motives, detect subtle forms of coercion, and differentiate between genuine empathy and calculated influence. Psychological awareness becomes a tool for preservation. Intuition, observation, and critical thinking combine to form a defensive yet receptive posture. To open up without losing power is to approach relationships with both heart and mind fully engaged, never passively yielding to circumstance. Empathy, paradoxically, is also central to this practice. True connection demands understanding, sensitivity, and emotional attunement. Yet empathy must be wielded deliberately, without dissolving into self-effacement. It is the ability to connect with another's experience while maintaining one's own identity, to absorb understanding without surrendering autonomy. Historical figures who navigated complex social hierarchies, diplomats, thinkers, and artists alike, demonstrated this balance. They engaged deeply, listened profoundly, and acted decisively, always aware of the boundary between insight and exploitation. The final element is resilience, the capacity to recover from setbacks without internalizing failure. Reopening is rarely linear. It comes with missteps, misunderstandings, and occasional betrayal. Strategic vulnerability transforms these experiences into learning opportunities rather than sources of self-doubt. It allows one to iterate, refine, and continue opening with increasing wisdom, reinforcing the idea that power does not lie in armor, but in mastery over one's emotional landscape. The practical implications of these strategies are profound. By combining boundaries, discernment, empathy, and resilience, an individual can navigate the world with a rare equilibrium, open enough to experience the richness of human connection, guarded enough to remain sovereign over their own mind and heart. This is the art of opening up without surrendering power, a skill as timeless as it is contemporary, drawing from philosophy, psychology, and lived experience alike. By the end of this section, the audience should recognize that reconnecting with the world is not a gamble. It is a craft, one that can be honed through reflection, practice, and awareness. The tension between vulnerability and power is not a contradiction to be resolved, but a dynamic to be mastered. With these tools, viewers are invited to envision the transformative potential of calculated openness, a life in which connection does not compromise control and trust becomes a conscious choice rather than a naive surrender. The transformative power of strategic openness. There is a subtle but profound alchemy that occurs when strategic openness is mastered. It is the transformation that comes not from reckless exposure, but from disciplined vulnerability, an ability to connect deeply without surrendering autonomy. This transformation touches every facet of life: relationships, creativity, leadership, and self-perception. It is both personal and social, quiet yet far-reaching, the kind of change that cannot be legislated or imposed. It must be lived. At its core, this power is rooted in self-awareness. Individuals who open strategically understand their own needs, desires, and limits. They know which aspects of themselves are safe to reveal and which are to be protected. This awareness fosters confidence, a quiet certainty that the self is sovereign, capable of both intimacy and independence. It also cultivates resilience, the capacity to absorb betrayal or disappointment without being broken, to navigate relationships with discernment rather than fear, and to recognize that vulnerability is a choice, not an obligation. Historical and modern examples illuminate the impact of this mastery. Think of leaders who inspired loyalty not through dominance, but through genuine transparency tempered by discernment. Consider artists whose emotional honesty, shared selectively, resonated universally without leaving them exposed to exploitation. Even in everyday life, the individual who approaches connection with strategic openness finds that empathy is reciprocated, trust is cultivated, and influence grows, not through manipulation, but through authenticity. Psychologically, this transformation shifts the balance of power inward. No longer does fear of betrayal dictate behavior. No longer does past trauma prevent engagement with the present. Strategic openness allows the individual to reclaim agency, to move freely between connection and solitude, intimacy and independence, without the constant anxiety that once constrained every interaction. In this state, power and vulnerability are no longer opposing forces, they are complementary, each amplifying the other. The benefits ripple outward, relationships deepen, collaboration becomes more fruitful, and personal creativity flourishes. Emotional intelligence is enhanced, allowing one to navigate the complexities of modern life with nuance and subtlety. And perhaps most importantly, the individual experiences a sense of alignment, the internal world harmonized with external reality, fear transformed into discernment, and solitude balanced with connection. By the end of this section, the audience is invited to recognize the profound potential of strategic openness. It is a tool for empowerment, a philosophy for life, and a roadmap for personal evolution. Vulnerability is not weakness. It is a calculated, intentional force that, when wielded wisely, amplifies strength, deepens connection, and transforms the individual from someone who merely survives in a world of uncertainty into someone who thrives. Conclusion: owning your power while connecting. In the end, all paths converge on a single, profound insight. True power does not demand isolation, nor does connection require surrender. The journey through fear, walls, history, and psychology leads to a simple yet revolutionary truth. One can open up, allow oneself to be seen, and still remain sovereign over one's mind, heart, and agency. This is the culmination of strategic openness, the ultimate reconciliation of vulnerability and control. By now, the audience has witnessed the delicate mechanics of trust, the invisible architecture of emotional defenses, and the historical and modern forces that both encourage and punish openness. They have explored the psychological underpinnings of fear, the dynamics of manipulation, and the strategies by which one can safely engage with the world. What emerges is a vision of human potential, one in which connection becomes a conscious choice, guided by insight and tempered by self-awareness. Ownership is key. To connect without losing power is to reclaim one's narrative. It is to step into interactions not as a passive participant, but as an active architect of engagement. The past no longer dictates behavior. Betrayal is no longer a chain that binds the self. Each relationship, each exchange, is approached with intention, clarity, and courage. This is not a sterile mastery of technique. It is a profound internal freedom, an alignment of the self that allows for both intimacy and autonomy. The world, with its noise, manipulation, and uncertainty, remains unchanged, but the individual's experience of it transforms completely. Vulnerability, when wielded strategically, becomes a source of influence rather than a liability. Openness becomes a strength, not a weakness. The walls that once imprisoned now serve as guides, marking where discernment is necessary and where trust can flourish. In this state, power and empathy are no longer contradictory forces. They are mutually reinforcing. Ultimately, this journey invites reflection and action. The audience is called to consider their own lives, their own defenses, and the delicate balance between protection and exposure. They are encouraged to step forward, not recklessly, but with awareness, curiosity, and courage, to engage with the world fully, to build meaningful connections, and to reclaim agency in a landscape that constantly tests both. As the documentary closes, the message resonates. To open up again is not to surrender. It is to transcend fear. It is to navigate life with conscious agency, to experience connection without losing oneself, and to recognize that the true mastery of human interaction lies not in isolation or armor, but in the deliberate, courageous art of strategic openness. Here, vulnerability and power converge, and the individual emerges whole, free, and profoundly alive.